In liturgical churches during the Easter season, which came to an end last Sunday, the gospel readings were from the chapters in John's gospel known as the final discourse of Jesus. It was chapter 14 through 17, and for several weeks there. And in fact, if you need a place to open the Gospels and do some spiritual reflection, that's probably the best place to begin. The high priestly prayer of Jesus, and the last speech is in chapter 17. And in this sense, it's Jesus' last will and testament, his parting shot, his last effort to teach, to exhort, to encourage, to empower his disciples. The part of that I want to focus on this morning is these words from Jesus' prayer where he says, "Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one." Jesus, of course, is not a Christian and probably had no sense of the development of a church that would be named for him. I'm sure he had no awareness of the doctrines that were going to be developed in the 4th century and the fragmented form that his movement would eventually take in the 21st century. But if we took this prayer for unity seriously, what would that look like? Huh? If we woke up to this need for oneness, as he prayed in our day and time, what would it mean? The pluralistic nature of the world seems to be more and more apparent in the year 2019. Regardless of what you think of other people's religions or non-religions, they are my neighbors, they're my co-workers, they're my boss, maybe even my spouse and my children. Religious pluralism means more than just a grudging admission that there are other people in the world who have different and bizarre beliefs when contrasted with mine. If we took this prayer of Jesus for oneness seriously, it might mean that we start perceiving the beliefs of others as a part of the story of the human family, attempting to respond to who or what they consider God to be. Religious pluralism means being open to the fact that non-Christian religions and beliefs are not about to pass away, nor are they quirks of fate. They're a legitimate part of the human story. They have an integrity and a vitality of their own. They reflect, as does the Christian faith, the heights and depths and majesty and misery of human life and the various ways that human beings are responding to all of that. To go more deeply into the religious traditions of the world is to find a common core of the experience of the divine, which moves beyond cultic forms, dogmatic teachings, legal codes, and magical practices. This level of the experience of the holy has been called perennial wisdom or the perennial tradition. And I've talked about that extensively in several talks here. This is the universal wisdom that shows up at the depths of all the world's great religions. This perennial wisdom, this perennial tradition, the scholars argue, is not found in just one religion and community, but it's found in Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufis, Native American traditions. The perennial wisdom of divine union was first beautifully expressed in the writings of the Vedas, the oldest source of Hinduism. The phrase, I wish Joshna was here, she could help me with this Hindu phrase in Sanskrit, but it was T-A-T, I can't even say it, T-A-T, T-V-A-M-A-S-I.
Tattvamasi.
All right, great. Which translated means, you are that. I am that. The meaning of this saying is that the true self, in its original, pure, primordial state, is wholly identifiable or even identical with God, the ultimate reality that is the ground and the origin of all reality. And you are that. This is the reality of oneness that Jesus was talking about in this. Jesus was a perennialist. What about that? Now, this does not prove that all religions are the same, okay? Our differences are real and important. It's still important for each of us to live out of the symbols, rituals, and prayers of our own tradition, to know our own story, and to be securely grounded in our own faith. My story and my faith form the pathway into the holy for me. The Jesus way, it so happens, is my pathway into the holy for me. And you'll have to decide what it is for you. But we're also called to go beyond these stories and symbols and to share in the depth of the divine that is available to anyone in the world. William Smith, the great historian of religion, says that the crucial factor in human religiousness is faith. Faith, he says, is not sectarian or cultic, but it's an attitude of openness and trust toward the transcendent, toward the sacred. Faith is the way that people describe their relationship with what they call God. Faith is expressed in a host of ways by different religious traditions, but faith is the animating power of religious life. It's the common thread that links together the whole of human religiousness. Smith proposes that it's much more accurate to speak of the Christian way of having faith, the Muslim way of having faith, the Hindu way of having faith. The process is the most important thing rather than the content. It's the attitude of the heart rather than the concepts in the mind. Dr. Diane Eck, a professor of religion at Harvard University and a practicing Methodist, recently adopted 4 Muslim teenage orphans from Syria. When Ramadan rolled around last year, the whole family wanted to celebrate with the teenagers. They all found themselves at the local mosque where Diane wanted to be with her new children whose parents had been murdered in the name of God not long ago. Diane felt it was important to go up to the front of the mosque with her adopted children, where a woman loaned her a scarf so her face would not touch the floor when she prostrated herself. She's still a practicing Methodist, but now wants to honor the faith her children grew up with and thereby honor them. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, who was, I think, the spiritual father of the 20th century, said that the deepest level of communication is not communication, but it's communion. He said it's wordless. It's beyond words. It's beyond speech. It's beyond concept. Not that we discover a new unity, but with communion we discover an old unity. My dear brothers and sisters, we're already one. But we imagine we're not. Thomas Keating said the only thing that separates us from God is the thought that we're separated from God. What we have to recover is our original unity. What we have to become is who we already are. Merton was also the one that had that wonderful mystical experience on the street corner of Louisville, Kentucky, where he suddenly was overwhelmed with the realization that he loved all of these people out there on the street. He said, I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge could touch, the core of their reality, the person that they all were in God's eyes. What if we could wake up every day and spend the day in a sustained grace of a grateful groundedness of the inherent holiness of each present moment? And the inherent holiness of each person we meet. Here's the estrangement from the sacred that we need to recognize, that we forget again and again. The divinity, the oneness that we all are in God, in Christ. What if you could wake up every morning to your utter ordinariness, sensing the divinity of your utter ordinariness? One of my favorite poets is the 14th century Sufi poet named Hafiz. Listen to this poem by him entitled, I Have Learned So Much from God. I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even pure soul. Love has befriended Hafiz so completely that it has turned to ash and freed me from every concept and image my mind has ever known. I have learned so much from God. The truth has shared so much of itself from me. Love has befriended me so completely that it has freed me of every concept and image my mind has ever known. Thomas Merton also wrote a lot about how to go about realizing our oneness with God, how to go about awakening to and discovering our true self. A lot has to do, he said, with our desire and the intentions of our heart. One time Merton told one of his students to stop trying so hard in prayer. He said, how does an apple ripen? It sits in the sun. The apple cannot ripen in one night by tightening all of its muscles squinting its eyes and tightening its jaw in order that it finds itself the next morning miraculously large, red, ripe, and juicy. It's like the birth of a baby, or the opening of a rose. The birth of the true self takes place in God's time. We must wait for God, huh? Oh, hell, I've been waiting a long time. But I'll wait. We must be awake while we wait. We must trust that God's hidden action is going on within. There's a story about awakening to our oneness with the true self and with God I read years ago. It's like a man who, while out walking alone on a bitter, cold, and starless night, unexpectedly comes upon a large, warm-looking house. Upon approaching the house, he presses his face against the window and sees himself sleeping comfortably before the fire. Suddenly, he realizes he's rich, but he stands impoverished. He's secure, yet he stands on the edge of death. He's fulfilled, yet he's sterile and empty. Frantically, he begins to pound on the window, yelling loudly to be let in. But the self inside does not hear. And as he pounds, the glass barrier dividing him from his life only grows thicker, and his clenched fists grow numb with pain. At long last, he finally realizes that all of his efforts of brute force achieve nothing. And he sits quietly in the snow, overcome by a growing, single, silent desire, by an unfaltering hope that he might be one with himself. This desire, though appearing powerless, awakens the self within. And with this awakening, the glass itself dissolves. The house dissolves, and he discovers that he's really at home all along and did not know it. He finds the night to be, in fact, his light, and the bitter cold to be itself a consuming fire of utter joy and fulfillment. The truth is, we're all in God, and God is in us, and we're all one in the divine, in the sacred. If each of us were able to live our lives out of that and project that truth out into the world, it would mean no more wars, no more poverty, no more hatred, no more crime, no more terrorism. If we can find a kernel of that truth, of that oneness in our own hearts today, then we and the world are much more closer to what Jesus was all about.